Let us now focus our attention on the periodic table. The first person that is credited with creating the periodic table is a Russian chemist named Dmitry Mendeleev. And in 1869, he observed that so many elements have been discovered and the atomic numbers are known and the masses are known. So he started by first arranging the elements according to their atomic masses. Then he observed that some of the elements have similar chemical properties. And that was the origin of the periodic table. The observation that some elements have similar chemical properties. Let me show you what that means. This was the first trial of Dmitry Mendeleev when he arranged the elements based on their atomic masses. But he found out that, for example, helium and neon and argon, they react in similar ways. Actually, these three do not react at all. He found out that lithium, sodium, potassium also behave similarly. Based on that observation that some elements, beryllium, magnesium, calcium, that they behave similarly. This is what he came up with. He placed elements with similar chemical properties in vertical columns. And he found out that if you start with one element and you arrange all the elements, when you get to the end, you begin with a similar chemical properties as the one you started with, which means there is a pattern to this. It is periodic. And that was the origin of the periodic table. So if you look at the periodic table, the very first thing you just learned about chemistry is that elements in the same column have similar chemical properties. Remember that. Now, there are three types of elements in the periodic table. Three types of elements. There are those that are called metals. There are those that are called non-metals. And there are those that are called metalloid. The metalloids at times are also called semi-metals. Your understanding of chemistry will depend on you being able to identify whether an element is a metal, a non-metal, or a metalloid. Let us begin with the non-metals. The non-metals are very easy to identify on the periodic table. Begin with carbon and then draw a diagonal line from carbon all the way down to radon. Carbon, phosphorus, selenium, iodine, radon. All the elements on that diagonal line are non-metals. All the elements to the right of the diagonal are also non-metals. The only element that is a nonmetal that is not among this set of elements is hydrogen. Hydrogen is a non-metal. So, you now know how to identify the nonmetals in the periodic table. Let us try to represent it here. You begin with carbon, you draw a diagonal from carbon down to radon, and every element on that diagonal and to the right of that diagonal is a nonmetal. The only one that is not there is hydrogen. Those are the nonmetals. Please remember. Let us now learn about the metalloids. To understand them, again, let us take a look at the periodic table. The metalloids begin with boron. We will draw a very small diagonal from boron to silicon. Then we will do what is called zig-zag, zig-zag. This is what I mean. Zig from silicon to germanium, zag from germanium to arsenic, zig from arsenic to antimony, zag from antimony to tellurium. And then we will end it with another small diagonal from tellurium to astatine. Let me try to represent that so that you see it clearly. So we began with boron, and we drew a small diagonal from boron to silicon. Then we did zig-zag, zig-zag, and we ended with astatine. There should be 7 of them. Metalloids are very unique in that, let us take a look at the periodic table again. They separate the metals from the non-metals. If you look at what we now have left on the periodic table, everything that is remaining is a metal. So all of these are metals. So we can simply generalize it that metals are on the left side of the periodic table. Non-metals are mostly on the right side of the periodic table, and the metalloids separate both the metals and the non-metals. Let us now try to learn about the properties of metals, non-metals, and metalloids. Let us begin with nonmetals. As we already indicated, nonmetals are on the upper right side of the periodic table. Some of them are solids at room temperature, and some of them are gases. Only one of them is a liquid. The liquid is iodine at room temperature. As a whole, nonmetals tend to be poor conductors of heat and electricity. This is the most important in chemistry. Nonmetals, when they combine with other elements in chemistry, they tend to gain electrons, which means they love to become anions. Please remember that nonmetals love to become anions. Let us now learn about metals. Metals occupy the left side of the periodic table. They tend to be very good conductors of heat and electricity. They are malleable, which means you can beat them into different shapes. They are ductile, which means you can draw them into wires. If you pull them, instead of just snapping into two, they will become wires. This is the most important one in chemistry. When metals undergo chemical reactions, they tend to lose electrons, which means they love to become cations. Again, please remember that. Very, very important. What about metalloids? Metalloids, as we already know, they lie along the zigzag diagonal line dividing the metals and the nonmetals. They have some properties of the metals. They also have some properties of nonmetals. And because of that, they are very good industrially. They are used in electronic devices. They are used to make most of the computers and everything based on computers. Let us take a look at some questions. Identify each of the following elements as a metal, a nonmetal, or a metalloid. Let us begin with sodium. This is sodium. Sodium is on the left side of the periodic table. And without thinking too much about it, I know that will be a metal. Bromine. Bromine is right here in the periodic table. If I draw my diagonal line from carbon down to radon, I see that the bromine is to the right of that diagonal line. So that makes bromine a nonmetal. Boron. Boron is definitely a metalloid. It is the first element we mentioned when we were talking about metalloid. Manganese. Manganese is right here. And again, remember, the metals are on the left side of the periodic table. So this is a metal. Carbon. This is carbon. Element number 6. It is the first element you mention when you're talking about nonmetals. So carbon is a non-metal.